Good afternoon. My name is Valerie Minty. By way of introduction, I'm a fourth generation Finnish American with deep roots on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. My grandparents and great-grandparents emigrated from Finland to the Iron Range in the early 20th century. My grandmother's father, Jarvinen, was killed in a mine cave-in accident in Rock Springs, Wyoming, a decade earlier before he could send money back to his wife and children, who had been left behind in Finland, waiting to join him in the United States. They all came with the shirts on their backs, looking for better jobs and for a safer place to raise a family, desperately wanting a place that was free of civil war, that offered decent paying jobs, that was free of poverty, famine, and starvation. The Iron Range needed workers. They needed workers in the lumber mills, in the fisheries, and in the iron mines, and they threw out the red carpet, so to speak, and also exploited these workers. My Minty great-grandparents farmed in Pike Sandy. My Minty grandfather mined and was active in several early labor unions, labor organizations, the IWW and the CIO, to mention several. And all of them were very, very active in the Finnish cooperative movement, where folks pooled their resources so that all could do better. I'm sure many of you hearing this talk have a similar backstory. For the last 120 years, it's been the Democratic Party that's led the fight for workers' rights, social equality, civil rights, health care, social security, women's rights, equal opportunity, workplace safety regulations, disability rights, and justice for all in this country. Throughout the early 1900s, as you can well imagine, working conditions in America were grim. Child labor was entrenched, discrimination of all types was rampant, commonplace, and acceptable. Lax safety regulations allowed hazardous conditions to persist. Workers were exploited for low wages, shamelessly long hours, and benefits were unheard of. And of course, there were no federal protections for unions or for workers, no protections to strike or to collectively bargain. The evolution of workers' rights only happened with the evolution of laws passed by Democrats, i.e., laws written by Democrats, often with the help of union leadership. Historically, Republicans have fought pro-union, pro-worker laws every single step of the way and still fight labor laws today. Please ignore what politicians say and instead watch what they do. It is so important that we all remember this important democratic history and that we remember it in the voting booths. Labor laws written and passed by Democrats transformed work in the United States and continue to do so today. What on earth would our jobs look like, our work lives look like, without the right to strike, picket, boycott, collectively bargain, or improve our dismal working conditions and join a union? We have Presidents Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt to thank for the Clayton Antitrust Act and the Wagner Act. What would we do without Social Security? I can barely imagine it. A program that pays retired workers a continuing income after 65. Many folks today, as well in the past, cannot make ends meet with their monthly salaries. How on earth are they expected to save for retirement? Social Security has been a godsend. Thank Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt. What would we do without the Fair Labor Standards Act, a law we take so for granted today, a law that provides minimum wage, an 8-hour workday, a 40-hour work week, and also protects kids from child labor exploitation, as well as pays overtime. Thank Democratic President Roosevelt for that law. What would we do without the Equal Pay Act passed by Lyndon Johnson, or the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act passed by President Obama? Thanks to these Democratic presidents, your wives, mothers, daughters, sisters, and aunts get equal pay for equal work. And the Democrats continue to work for pay equity because we are not all the way there yet. What would we do without Civil Rights Act or OSHA that ensures a non-hazardous workplace for all, or the Economic Recovery Act that strengthened unemployment benefits and the COBRA health insurance during the huge economic downturn of 2008, or the American Rescue Plan that saved us all during the pandemic when most businesses across the United States shut down. This law gave each of us $1,400 in our pockets. It extended unemployment benefits, it supported small businesses, and lowered health insurance premiums. What about the Infrastructure Act and Jobs Act of 2021 that created good-paying union jobs across the United States for the next decade to modernize our decaying roads, bridges, airports, transit systems, ports, broadband, drinking water, and wastewater infrastructure? And what about the PRO Act that's stuck in the U.S. Senate right now because the Republicans refuse to pass it and are stalling? This would have given us new rights and strengthened workers' rights to unionize and bargain collectively, and has many other union-friendly provisions. These are just a handful of pro-worker and pro-union laws that were written by and passed by Democrats. I have 4 pages of laws that I've researched that Democrats have passed to better the life of everyday Minnesotans and Americans. Republicans may give lip service to labor, but look at their actions, look at their records, and let's hold them to account. Instead of writing and passing meaningful labor laws that help working families, the Republicans have supported the right-to-work laws across the United States since President Roosevelt passed the New Deal in the 1930s, and they are determined to roll it all back. We should not be fooled by the name of these laws. They are anything but the right to work. The right to work laws usually translate to the right to work for less. Business interests have spent 80 plus years since the Roosevelt's New Deal to undermine labor. Instead, business crusades for the right to work laws. And the Republican Party listens and helps. Billionaires have donated millions to the Republican governors to help them pass these right-to-work laws. The Republicans sell the right-to-work laws as individual freedom. And I say, bah humbug. Instead, these laws are a batch of confusing restrictions on Americans' basic rights on the job. They roll back the right to unionize. They roll back any gains that the workers have made over the last 100 years. The rights my grandfather and likely your grandparents spent their lives fighting to get. Next door in the lovely state of Wisconsin, past governor, Republican Scott Walker succeeded turning Wisconsin into a right-to-work state with the help of outside billionaires like the Koch brothers, whose mission it is to kill unions. Billionaires like the Kochs helped the Republican Party write and pass pro-business legislation. We should all be asking our friends over in Wisconsin how it's going for them. Likely, they will tell you that the right-to-work laws take rights away from working people. These laws tilt the balance toward big business and further rig the system at the expense of working families. These laws make it harder for working people to form unions and bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. Today, there are 28 right-to-work states. They all had Republican governors when these laws were passed. We cannot let this happen in Minnesota or in any other state. Our labor laws, written and passed by Democrats, transformed work in America, and they still do. We went from an industrial revolution that looked more like Dickens' England to our work situation today, with many more rights, less discrimination, better wages, and in safer conditions. And it's not over. Unions are as relevant today as they were 100 years ago. Thank you for listening, and remember to vote Democratic.